Hi, welcome to this video which I recorded as a part of the DAT A2 assessment. I must state before I start that this is the actual video, the main video that accompanies the essay that I wrote. All of the other videos that can be found in the appendices of my essay provide very specific examples and evidence, etc. That I mention in text, but those are not to be viewed with the idea in mind that they're the main video. This is the main video, just to get that out of the way. So for this assessment, I decided to look into the recording of Hysteria by Def Leppard, which was released in 1987. In particular, I focused on how the guitar was recorded, pertaining to the sound, and also the ways in which they overdubbed parts and recorded them in shorter sections, rather than using a more conventional, relatively linear approach, for which they recorded sections in chunks, string by string, or chord by chord, to achieve a specific effect, to get a tight and punchy sound. So now I will talk about some key salient features that were experienced by the engineers and musicians at the time when this album was originally recorded, and I will talk about how I approximated what they experienced as closely as possible for me here at my home studio. That is not to say that I'm not very lucky to have access to a lot of gear, but some specific things I did were different compared to what they did, so yeah. So one of the most important things is that I used a Rockman Guitar Ace pocket amp, which although not exactly the same as the one they used, which was an X100 model, gave me a good idea of what the tone and possibilities were for them, also pertaining to the parameters that can be changed here, although their original books had slightly more options, and also what they were struggling with, because as historic sources mention, there were some issues which I go further into in the essay as a result of using this particular recording box. Although Phil Collen used his Felix Super Strat, which featured a floating tremolo and a DiMarzio Super Distortion in the bridge, I didn't have access to a Super Strat or a similar guitar, so hence I decided to use these two Les Pauls. This one sounded a bit better and the intonation was better, which was very important for some of the things I recreated, but this one had a floating bridge, which was essential in recreating some of the parts, so I used both of them depending on what the part was asking for. The only other option I had was a Telecaster, which has a single coil pickup, which has a totally different sound and output, so hence I decided to use these two guitars. In order to record the sound coming from the Rockman, I connected a headphone lead to one of the line-ins of this console. Now this console isn't an SSL, which was what was originally used. However, it is also quite transparent, at least compared to the other two big console manufacturers, Neve and API, and therefore I used one of the line inputs on this desk to record the Rockman, so that means I didn't go through a preamp. I also used the onboard EQ to EQ the sound, and that signal then went into an Antelope 32 Plus interface into my DAW of choice, which is Pro Tools. I, just like they did, played everything I recorded along to click track, after which, for context, I then checked it with a backing track. The two main approaches to overdubbing, which I replicated based on the original sessions, were the string by string or note by note method, as well as the chord by chord method. Lastly, to test the difference between how the Rockman stacks when it is overdubbed versus more traditional methods which involve recording different guitars and different amps, I used a very short drum beat. It is worth mentioning that although it seems like it wasn't a lot of work, I recorded several parts multiple times to illustrate the difference between how a conventional approach to recording those parts would have sounded, and that also I had to record certain parts several times in order to get closer to the actual sound I was looking to replicate.